Hello, everybody. How are we doing tonight? Feeling good. Okay. It is so wonderful to see everybody join us today, especially after your long work day. We know that it is taking time out of your busy schedules to come join us, and we are just really grateful that you were also interested to come and learn a little bit about public art, about our process, about how you can learn how to work with some of our agencies. Again, this is Public Art 101, Concept to Commission. So we are going to be doing something of an overview of these processes. And at the end of this session today, we'll talk a little bit about how you can learn more in the coming months about these different topics. But today, we're just going to give you as much information as we can packed into this hour session. So keep track of your questions. We will have Q&A at the end. So if there's anything we didn't cover today, we will have a Q&A section in order to cover that. We also want to make you guys aware that tonight's panel is being recorded, and that recording is going to be made available on our websites and platforms afterwards as a resource going forwards. So we'll make you guys aware when that's available, but again, just be aware that this is being recorded today. So today we're going to be covering a couple different topics. So we're going to talk about each of our programs, who we are, how we function. We're going to talk about the difference between public and private funding for public art, because those can be slightly different procedures. We're also going to go through the differences between an RFP and an RFQ process, and we'll also define that for you if you're unfamiliar. And then we're going to talk about tips and tricks for submitting an RFQ, for getting a good result from that. And then, of course, tips and tricks for a committee presentation should you do really well in the submitting the RFQ portion of this. So, who we are. First of all, we are so lucky to be joined today by Utah-based public art design team Tooza Design, Rob and Shelley Beishline. Give a little bit of applause for Rob and Shelley who are joining us today. Rob and Shelley have worked with all three of our programs at different times, and so they have a really great artist perspective on what it's like to work with our different agencies. You'll also note out this window to the side, one of Tooza's works is titled 100 Items. It's in the County Public Art Program. So if you had a chance to look at that before the program, definitely ask some questions about it afterwards. And if you didn't get a chance, please check it out after this program. Tooza Design was founded in 1997 by Rob and Shelley Beishline. They are a multidisciplinary design studio focusing on sculpture, public art, environmental graphics, fine art painting, ceramics, graphic design, and public art planning. They are committed to excellence in fabrication, craftsmanship, and communication at every step. They consider thoughtfully those who experience their art with designs that reflect an understanding of the past, connection to the present, and vision forward to a shared future. So they're going to be able to offer some wonderful perspective on a couple of different points here, and they're also available for questions. We're also going to talk a little bit each one by one about our different programs, and we'll start with me. My name is Hannah Nielsen. I'm the Public Art Manager for the Utah Public Art Program, so I run the State Public Art Program. We are a Percent for Art program. We were established in 1985, and our program essentially uses 1% to a cap of $200,000 of capital expenditures set aside for the acquisition and commissioning of works of art for public buildings. So basically, when a capital development project is approved, we get 1% of those funds to a cap of $200,000 to commission public artwork across the state of Utah. The purpose of our program is to enhance the quality of life in the state of Utah by placing art of the highest quality in public spaces where it can be seen by the general public. Actually, about 70% of the general public's experience with art happens outside of traditional art spaces like museums or galleries. So the inclusion of public art in our communities is really, really important in sometimes being the first experience that people have with art. We also promote and preserve appreciation for and exposure to the arts, and we foster cultural development in the state and encourage the creativity and talents of its artists and craftspeople. And now I am going to turn over to Kate Ithurralde with the county.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you all so much for being here. We know how precious your time is, so we really greatly appreciate your presence here today, and we hope it's it's helpful for you. So yeah, my name is Kate Ithurralde. I am the Art and Public Places Manager for Salt Lake County. I have the honor of overseeing 2 county art collections, so the Percent for Art collection, which we're here to talk about today, and how you get into that collection. But I also manage the visual art collection. You saw some of the works in the visual art collection as you came through the building. The visual art collection has a unifying theme of Utah. We have about 800 works in the collection, and it's at 52 different county buildings. The Percent for Art collection, we have about 100 works in that collection, and it's also at about, I think, 63 different county buildings. The Percent Art for collection is very similar to the state. It's funded through a Percent for Art ordinance, which dictates 1% of all capital funds to go to the art in the building. Of course, I say that if the council approves it, it's designated for the building. I am also assigned other projects, so funding for these other projects are very various. So sometimes the Salt Lake County Division will set aside funds for a public art project, or sometimes I apply for grants so I can offer public art projects to the community. And with that, oh, and please follow us. I have a social media account, it's on Instagram, SLCO Art in Public Places. I post all my calls there, so that's a great point of reference for you guys to know what's going on with my call for arts. And now I'll turn it over to Amy with the city.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Childress, and I am the Public Art Program Coordinator for the Salt Lake City Arts Council. My program commissions public art for new and existing city-owned buildings and public spaces in Salt Lake City. We are over 40 years old, and were established by the Percent for Art ordinance in 1984. And this ordinance allows for 1.5% of city project funds to go to public art for new construction projects in Salt Lake City. We also get funding from other departments for projects. We get funding from the Department of Transportation, the Community Reinvestment Agency, and Public Lands. We have over 160 artworks in our collection, and they vary in mediums, and they're in city parks, plazas, buildings, skate parks, recreational centers, just everywhere in the 7 council districts of Salt Lake City. We also manage the Art Design Board, which is a 7-member citizen advisory committee that makes recommendations to the mayor on which artists should be commissioned. And for our program, the mayor has final approval for artist selection on public art projects in Salt Lake City. So next we're gonna go over what is public art. So public art is art made for public spaces, places everyone can access, both interior and exterior public spaces. Public art is meant to add something meaningful to a community and reflect the neighborhood or area where it's located. And often it's shaped by community input and context. A lot of people think of murals or sculptures when they hear public art, but it can be so much more than that. Public art can be sculptures, it can be mosaics, murals, memorials, integrated architectural or landscape features, art-designed furniture, placemaking features, mixed media installations, fountains, or like a mix of them all. So next we're gonna talk about public versus private when it comes to funding. So who funds public art? So public art can be funded both privately and publicly. Public art programs run by government agencies, like all 3 of our programs, sometimes referred to as Percent for Art programs, make up the public side of funding. Most cities, counties, and states have their own public art programs. So when you're looking for opportunities, make sure to look up any city, county, or state for their public art programs, and you can get on newsletters of theirs to hear about upcoming RFQs and open calls for them. And even the federal government has a public art program. And additionally, some government agencies may distribute their funding to outside arts organizations or nonprofits to run their public art program. So you could also, normally on those websites for those city agencies, they'll let you know who runs their public art program. And then on the private side of public art funding, we have developers and corporations. They often sponsor projects to enhance their spaces. Also nonprofits, foundations, community organizations, and even individuals also commission art for public art. And so how is public art funded? Through government programs like ours, public art is funded with public money. And so often through percent for art ordinances that dedicate a small percentage of construction budget to public art. We all deal with those projects. And then when projects are funded this way, there's typically a more structured process for selecting artists and final artworks. So proposals are reviewed by committees or art boards, and the process is designed to be transparent, from budgets to artist selection. For example, our art design board meetings are open to the public, and the audio recordings of those are available online. So anyone can attend our monthly meetings if you're ever interested. And there's also a greater level of accountability in how public funds are spent and how community input is included. On the other hand, privately funded public art is usually more flexible in their selection process. So private funders, whether that's developers, organizations, or individuals, they can set their own priorities and choose artists directly or decide where the artwork will go without as many procedural steps. A lot of times, private developers will use consultants for an RFQ process, but they don't have to. So just so that you're aware of that. And then who selects public art? As I mentioned, the Salt Lake City Public Art Program manages an art design board, and in general, an art design board is a governing or advisory group that oversees public art projects, reviews artist proposals, and makes sure each project aligns with community values and city policies. So our board meets monthly and includes artists, architects, community members, and they review the proposals and select the final recommendation that goes to the mayor for approval. For each public art project, we also invite city and community stakeholders to share their input during the selection process, and their feedback is important and helps guide the conversations, but only board members have voting power when it comes to this final decision. Now, while my program uses an art design board, Hannah and Kate's program use art selection committees, and these are formed specifically for each project and bring together a unique group of stakeholders, arts professionals, and community representatives to review and select artists or designs for that particular site. So their projects are going to have different selection committees for each different project, while our program has the same board with a rotating amount, different people from different city departments and communities. It's also important to note that public art managers like us do not select the art. We're non-voting members who just help guide and facilitate that process. So we don't select artwork and we don't make those decisions. So where is public art located? We've kind of talked about it already, but this is just a small sampling of where public art can be located and what kind of public art exists. For public-funded projects, public art can be located in parks, transit stations, libraries, government buildings, recreation centers, and public hospitals and universities. I just want to stress that public art can be both inside, interior and exterior. So a lot of times when we think about public art, we think about it outside, and we don't think about the art that can exist inside. For private-funded projects, public art can be located in hotel lobbies, and courtyards, arenas, corporate campuses, and private universities and hospitals. I'm going to show you a picture of public art. One is public funded and one is privately funded. And unless it specifically says on the plaque, it can be hard to tell how an artwork was funded just by looking at it. But we just want to emphasize that behind the scenes, the processes are very different for each one.
Thank you so much. So I am going to be talking about RFP and RFQs. Just as a reminder, an RFP stands for Request for Proposal, and an RFQ stands for Request for Qualifications. As kind of like a general rule of thumb, I kind of like to break it down and simplify it. So an RFP, a Request for Proposal, is literally asking what is your idea and how best can you show it to the committee. A Request for Qualifications is showing how you're qualified to complete this project. And generally speaking, requests for proposals are 1 phase and requests for qualifications are 2 phases. I printed out, this is an example of one of my requests for qualifications. You will see it is a very heavy document. This document is about 17 pages long, so we fully recognize it is a lot to read and there's a lot of information in there, but please become really familiar with the RFP document itself. Once you start reading them, you'll start to notice very, very similar things in all RFPs and RFQs, including project goals, so what the project seeks to accomplish and the desired outcomes. And I should say, like, us managers who write these very lengthy documents, we really spend time with the design team and the people who might serve on the selection committee, and we're really working with them to find out exactly their goals and objectives. So please make sure you're really familiar with the project goals and include that in your narrative when you go to write it. We'll outline the project budget. We do specify what you have to include in the project budget, so make sure when you get to that point where you're including the budget, it's there. Please read the project background. We also provide the evaluation and scoring matrices. We'd like that to be very, very transparent for you so you know exactly what the committee will be scoring on. It will include the project timeline and also the project deliverables, so like what you have to submit for your application. Essentially, this really long document and your application kind of merge together to become the contract we will sign at the end. So you do really want to become very familiar with the RFP or RFQ. So yeah, just to kind of dive in more. So a request for proposal, again, it's what is your project idea? So you as an artist will submit a specific project concept with visuals and detailed information. It will require a comprehensive proposal, including a project narrative, sketches, budget, and timeline. Artists are usually not compensated for a proposal development unless otherwise stated in the call. And this is really used when agencies want to review a complete project idea before making the selection, but a lot of other thought goes into it. For example, I had a budget of only $16,000 for a public art call. I needed to make sure that the final artist got the most money they could possibly get for that project. So I did the RFP. Also, this thinking about timelines, sometimes my projects are incredibly rushed and I do not have time for a 2-phase project. So a lot of thought goes into whether or not we as managers do an RFP or an RFQ. So next, the request for qualifications. And again, the request for qualifications, usually it's 2 phases. But that first phase, it's really who is qualified for the project, right? We are looking at your qualifications, your past work. So again, it's really focusing on your experience and your portfolio. You will be asked to submit a resume, work examples, and a statement of interest, like why you want to apply for this project. The selection is usually based on artistic merit, experience, and project capability. And this is really used in the early stages of a project to shortlist the artists. No design proposal is required for the first phase, but finalists may receive an I call them semifinalists, may receive an honorarium to develop the concepts. And so yeah, so you might be asking, like, how will you end up submitting the RFP? So again, please make sure you read the full document because the submission, how you will submit it will be outlined in the document. Pay particular attention to the time. Unfortunately, if you submit a minute late, I will not be able to accept your application. We are very, very strict about the time. So always follow the instructions on the RFP, RFQ document. Really become familiar. These are the 3. So I use a combination of CAFE and U3P. I know the city uses a combination of CAFE and Submittable, and then the state is purely using CAFE right now. So if you become familiar with these 3 softwares, it will really cover your bases for it. And I know regionally too, a lot of regional government agencies also use these. So really become familiar. I cannot hesitate or stress this enough. Please do not wait until the last minute. It absolutely kills me when we get emails saying, you know, the system isn't working or we're having issues. Please become familiar very early on so we can help address those with you. Oops. I'm going to turn it over to Hannah now.
Okay, so now we know the difference between an RFP and an RFQ. However, each of our programs run these a little bit differently. So we're gonna walk you through exactly what it takes to get from the beginning of the project to when we have selected a finalist. So with my particular program, we find out about a project when the Division of Facilities, Construction, and Management lets us know about it. We do not select projects. We get projects decided by which buildings have been approved that meet our parameters. So a DFCM project manager comes to me, they hand me a building, and I say, fantastic, we have a project. At that point, we sit down and we start reaching out because it's time to form our unique selection committee. Each of our projects needs a completely unique selection committee, and that selection committee is going to include a project architect, it's going to include the state DFCM project manager, and it is also going to include a visual arts specialist. We want somebody to be able to help the committee members visualize and understand the artistic side of the project, because the remainder of the committee are community members. They are primary users of the space. So if I'm working at a regional center, that could be people who are going to be working at the DMV. If I'm working in a university, that could be professors, that could be students. We really want people who are going to have to interact with this project day to day to day to be able to inform what that final outcome is going to be. We then have a kickoff meeting with the committee. I sit there and I tell them, here's how much money we've got, here's the timeline that we've got, here's some of our basics that we're gonna be working with, and then I work with them to try to decide and understand what is gonna be the best for them for this project. What do they need out of this project? What is gonna serve them day to day from the artwork here? At that point, we start working on that request for qualifications together. My particular program only does request for qualifications, so if you want to work with the state, we are only currently using an RFQ process, and that's for a variety of reasons. But we work together on that document to make sure that it matches our committee's goals for the project. After that, we put it up on the submission portal. Again, we only use Cafe, so if you want to learn about us, hang out on Cafe, that's where we are. And then we publicize through various platforms. So we put it on our social media, make sure to follow us there. We put it on our newsletter. You can sign up for our newsletter. We put it on our website. We also email it to a variety of other public art managers on our various listservs so that they can publicize it through their platforms. We really want to get as many eyes on it as possible. So if you are interested in learning more and being able to see where all these projects are coming from, make sure that you're taking advantage of those resources because we do want you to see it. So at that point, we have a online jury review. So the committee goes through and looks at all of your applications. They see every single one of them, and they indicate whether they are sort of generally interested, if the work that they are seeing in previous work samples from the various artists seem like they're going to be a good fit for the project, if the artist seems qualified, or if it is just sort of inspiring them in some way. At that point, we sit down with the committee, we review the results, and we typically have a really in-depth conversation about the top 7 to 10 scoring artists there, regardless of where they landed in that top 7 to 10 score. And that's so that we can talk about, you know, what we liked seeing there, what we want to see from them. We really try to get a direction from the committee when we ask the artist to present a proposal. We then let the finalists know that they've been selected as a finalist and they're going to be invited to present a proposal. We give them an honorarium to develop that proposal, and that honorarium tends to range depending on how many resources we're expecting the artist to have to put in. So if an artist is going to have to travel, for example, extensively, if they're coming from out of state, they're going to get a slightly higher honorarium because they may have to spend money on a hotel or airlines, whereas if you're coming really from quite close, you may not have to expend that money. We then have an information session. We want to make sure that the finalists have as much information as they need to give us a really, really solid proposal. Because when we're looking at those at the committee, we are looking at the feasibility of it. We're looking at the logistics. We're thinking about long-term maintenance. We're thinking about how it integrates with the campus. And once that contract's signed, we're going. So we really want to make sure that when you're coming into the table on that finalist presentation day, that you have something that is really, really solid and thought out and thorough. And again, we have in-person presentations. We really like everybody to be in the room together. It really helps. And again, sometimes, as we'll mention as we're coming up on tips for presentations, it can be really helpful to have physical samples in front of you. It can help the committee members to understand what's going on. So we like to do it in person. And then we have a nice long committee deliberation. We really talk it out. We fight it out. We don't fight. We fight a little to get that decision that is really, really going to suit the location and the area and the community that it's serving. Awesome. Now, we're going to talk about, the county, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so as Hannah said, each of our processes are a little bit different. So for the county, we still do both RFPs and RFQs. Again, I really pick which one will match the project better. So for an RFP, I first receive the budget, and I really, again, work with the person commissioning or the division commissioning the artwork and really finalize their project goals. I will then work with Salt Lake County contracts and procurements. I'm a government agency. I really want to stress this because I do have to follow just like all of us, but I do have to follow county policy. One thing that's different is unfortunately during this phase, I'm unable to answer your questions directly. It's laid out in the RFP that all the questions actually have to go through the contracts office. So if I get a question, I have to forward it that way. The reason for that is for transparency. The contracts and procurements will actually then forward it to all the artists that they know are interested in the application. So it's, again, for fair and transparency in government. Once I work with contracts and procurements, I'll issue the RFP. For the RFP, it is an anonymous selection committee. What I can tell you, it's always made up of community members, art enthusiasts, design people who are part of the design project, architects. So that is, really your audience for your RFP. Interested applicants, please attend the pre-proposal meeting. We always put these dates in the RFP, and it kills me because sometimes nobody shows up, and I'm like, this is your one opportunity to really ask thorough questions, and we want to answer your questions. So please, I know, again, you guys are so busy, but if you can, please make time to show up because it's just so helpful, and it will really help guide you through that process. The applications will close, and again, we are very strict on the time. Once the applications are closed, we do turn the applications over to the committee members. So they do have time to review it. And then we will have a meeting where we will select the finalist for this one-phase RFP, and then I, as the county, will enter into a contract with the artist. And then I can start talking to you, which is really great. For the RFQ process, it's very similar. So that the green is very similar to the RFPs. It gets different in the orange coloring. So again, I will receive a budget, I'll work with contracts and procurements. This committee is semi-anonymous for that first phase. You won't know, but if you make it to the semi-finalists, you will meet them in the committee meeting where you will do an in-person meeting. Again, please come to the pre-proposal meeting. The committee members will review your applications for that first phase, and then they will select usually 3 to 5 semi-finalists, and that's all outlined in the RFQ. The semifinalists will then have a very robust meeting with the design team where they can ask all their questions. We distribute files like CAD files and everything for the project. And then they will submit their designs and do an in-person meeting. Then the selection committee will review the final proposals, and again, I will enter into a contract. And now I'll turn it over to the city.
Okay, so I'm going to walk you through the Salt Lake City Public Art Program's RFQ process, and we're going to start with development. So our art design board begins by selecting sites that are eligible for capital improvement projects or % for art funding, and then once a site is chosen, we work with the board to determine the budget and timeline for that project. And depending on the scale, timelines can range anywhere from about 9 months to 2 years for projects. So next, we look at community engagement. In many cases, we rely on engagement that's already been done by our city colleagues for that site, but if we feel more input is needed, we'll conduct additional outreach, often through surveys or community events. For example, we just did a community survey for What's Next for the Whale for Out of the Blue by Stephen Kessler in 9th and 9th neighborhood. And then after engagement, we move on to drafting the call for artists or the RFQ itself. And that community engagement can really drive the project goals. The RFQ itself is written by our team with input from the art design board and project stakeholders. And once it's ready, we post the RFQ on our submission portals. Kate said, we use Submittable and Cafe, and which stands for Call for Entry. And then we promote it through our Instagram. So we have an Instagram. It's SLC_Public Art Program. So make sure to follow us there. We also have a listserv for artists that you can sign up for on our website, and we will send out emails that way. We don't send out a ton of emails, but just when we know of opportunities, and if we have an opportunity that we can highlight as well. And then the Salt Lake City Arts Council also has a newsletter that you can sign up for, and we also post our open calls there. And then we also, again, reach out to other public art programs to help us spread the word. And then for our jury and selection process, once the application period closes, the Art Design Board and project stakeholders review all of the submissions, and then during an official Art Design Board meeting, which again are public meetings and recorded, they will select the finalists with input from stakeholders. And typically we choose about 3 finalists, and those finalists are then notified and they sign a proposal agreement with the city. We also provide each of them with an honorarium to compensate them for developing and presenting their proposals. And then after the agreements are in place, we hold a pre-proposal fact-finding meeting. And this is where the finalists receive any additional materials they might need, and they can ask staff questions. We also usually have a city representative there as well, and this is someone who is connected to the construction project, and they can answer any site-specific or technical questions to the artists. And then once the finalists have completed their proposal, they present them during an Art Design Board meeting, which also includes members of the Arts Council and project stakeholders. And after the presentation, the board discusses the proposals and votes on which one they want to recommend to the mayor. And then once the mayor gives final approval, we can begin the contracting process with the city. And our contracting process can take a while. And so we just ask that artists are patient with us, because it's just something that we don't have control over. But once that contract is officially in place, we do an official commission announcement and also a press release and share it across all channels. So, yeah, sure is. Okay, guys, tips and tricks. It can be a daunting process, and you're going to have to apply to a lot of these. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to talk through some tips and tricks that we have compiled from our end, and then afterwards, we're going to have some tips and tricks from Shelley and Rob, who have done this process so many times, and hopefully they'll have some great stuff to say to you, too. So, our main tips and tricks, and we've said this a couple of times, but it bears repeating, read that RFQ. We wrote that to basically be a job description for this project, and again, we do care about your time, so please read the RFQ thoroughly to determine if it's a good fit for you. If we're looking for an exterior sculpture in the roundabout, and we get a submission that has exclusively landscape photography, that's gonna be a tough one for us. So, be proactive. If available, attend pre-proposal meetings. That's not always going to be the case, but if it's there, attend it. Make the time for it. It's really going to be worth it. Ask questions. When in doubt, follow the provided guidelines to ask questions. Don't wait until the last minute. So as Kate mentioned, in her particular case, you cannot ask Kate directly, but there are ways in which you can get more information. In my case, you can email me directly and ask questions if you want to know whether this project is a good fit for your particular set of skills, or if you just have questions, if you just have clarifications you can come talk to me and I want to answer. And of course, be respectful. Don't reach out to committee members unless you have explicit permission. Our committee members are usually volunteering their time to participate on this, and they need to be able to make a decision safely and in the best interests of their community. So unless you've been informed that you can talk directly to them, please don't. Okay. Proposal narrative tips. So pretty much every RFQ is going to ask you to submit some sort of narrative, whether it be a statement of interest or an artist bio. Be clear and concise. Clearly communicate your vision and artistic intent. Avoid vague or overly technical language. You only have so many words that you're going to be able to fit in there, so make them count. Introduce yourself briefly.
make sure that you were specifically mentioning this project that we're looking at right now. We want to know that this isn't just a copy and paste. You have thought specifically about this project. And again, you're going to have a variety of people reading this. You don't know who they are, so make sure that it's understandable to anybody that might come across it. State your inspiration if there's something that drives you as an artist, if there's something that inspires you about this RFQ. Make sure that you say that. The committee reads these, and they do care. Reference project goals. Align your proposal with the goals outlined in the RFP or RFQ. So again, this is really about specificity. I know it takes a little bit of extra time, but making sure that you are making a statement of interest that aligns directly with this project does matter because people do read them. Proofread and spell check. I know that one's kind of basic, but errors can make a proposal look a bit unprofessional. So take time to review your writing, have someone else check it, or use one of the many tools available. Takes 2 seconds. It can really, really help. And then, of course, allow for flexibility. If you're submitting an RFP, that might change because site details can change. If you're submitting your interest for an RFQ, even that can change a little bit, so just stay open to the possibilities there. Okay, and then portfolio images. So you're always going to be submitting work samples on an RFQ. And that is your very first impression with the committee. So make sure that you're making a really good impression, okay? Be strategic. Choose works that align with the goals of the current project. So again, to go back to my previous example, if the RFQ says, I'm looking for an exterior courtyard sculpture, and you happen to have pieces in your previous work that go across a whole variety of media, you've really stretched the gamut of what an artist can achieve, choose work samples that really relate to this project because the committee doesn't know that. And you want to show them that you're going to be a good fit for this. Make sure that your images are high quality, clear, well lit. You could have made the most beautiful artwork in the world, but if you are showing me a grainy cell phone picture from 2004, that is also going to be a tough sell. So it is really, really crucial as an artist to invest in good photography. That is something that you are not going to regret doing. So invest in some good photography of your artwork. And of course, check requirements, follow submission guidelines, file size, format, number of images. Again, those are pretty basic things, but they really do count. And lastly, but not least, avoid clutter and let the artwork shine. And one thing that I do want to point out about the artwork examples here is that there's both a proposal drawing and the final outcome of this project. Something that some artists ask me is, can I include renderings of artworks that have not yet been made in my work samples? And my answer to that is, yeah, a couple. Don't have it only be stuff that's not been made. But if you were a finalist somewhere and you came up with an entire gorgeous proposal and it wasn't selected, that is still oftentimes really good material for this. And I do know several artists who often make it again into finalist positions because committees liked the renderings that they saw. So don't discount that work. That can still be really useful later on. But make sure you still have a balance of actual realized artworks. Okay, turning it over to Rob and Shelley.
All right, can you hear me okay? Good. Thank you guys so much. We're really grateful to be here. We wanted to offer a couple of our tips and tricks too, and I would echo all the things that have been said. And you know, of those tips and tricks, I think Shelley and I are both like, yeah, we need to do better at that. But here.
They were so thorough. I mean, is there anything else for us to say? No.
Well, so this is kind of a fun story. This picture on the left, this was our very first submission to an RFP. So this was a proposal. And this was in 2011, I think, 14 years ago. And Shelley and I were so excited. We're like, we can do this? And we came up with this idea, and we were just like stoked. And then we totally did not get the commission. So we're like, okay. And we thought, okay, well, maybe this isn't for us. And just sort of went back to what we were doing. And what happened was a while later, it was probably more than a year later, this was for Salt Lake County, and we had someone at the county actually reach out to us and say, hey, we've got another proposal coming out. Would you guys be interested in submitting? And my reply was, well, yeah, we weren't successful last time. And they said, yeah, but yours was so good. We almost won. And we're like, well, we had no idea that it was well received. And so I think the first tip I would say is try to get some feedback. And there's a couple important points to remember about this. So first of all, these fine folks up here really want to give you feedback, but they may not necessarily be able to. So ask, and if they can, they will. If they can't, understand that that's the case. Sometimes they might, particularly on a qualifications package, they might get 100 or 200 packages of qualifications with 10 photos each. They're looking at 2,000 images. And so it's a lot of work, and it would be very difficult for them to give feedback to all those. But if you don't ask, you're not ever going to get any feedback, and we didn't know. And so we went ahead and did another proposal, and this picture on the upper right, your right, is our next proposal, and we ended up winning that. And this is Shelley's super screwball idea, but brilliant, of putting these shoes on this wall. These are shoes, Converse, Chuck Taylor Converse, and we ended up winning that proposal. And I think it's because of we were able to get some feedback, and we didn't give up. We were persistent in that. So,
Well, I'd say we almost gave up, but thoughtful words, encouraging your fellow artists and the people around you is very important. Oh, a little closer? Yes. Can you hear me better now? I am so sorry. This is my first time, so I'm a little nervous, but I will do my best. And I move a lot. We are like polar opposites, but we work well together. So one of the tips I would say is every artist has their skills, and sometimes you don't have all of the skills you wish you had. And so teaming or getting input or using resources to help you complete a project successfully. So he said that we didn't get that first project, and that's right. It's very hard as an artist when you're first going in. You're like, wait a second. I've been doing graphic design and paintings, but I want to do this interior sculpture or this exterior sculpture, and I have what I feel like are awesome ideas. And so in that case, my tip is watch for those RFPs. They're harder to come by, they're a little fewer, but that's your opportunity to really shine, because as she said in her direction, that's the first thing they see. Is your idea what you perceive that you can do? And then in your proposal, if you can express and have a good team that shows that you're going to be able to complete that project, even though you may not have had a lot of experience. So when Rob and I first started out, we found great fabricators and people that were well known in the industry that had done many public arts work for a lot of different public artists in the area. And so that's going to give also some confidence that when they're seeing those first proposals, that even if you haven't done one yet, like we all start at the starting point, right? And so that's one of the tips. And then I would say that's a key leverage right there, is helping on that. So we have lots of more. Catch us afterwards and in between. But did you have anything more? We'll move it on to you guys. So thank you.
Thanks, Rob and Shelley. So next we're going to go into committee presentations for RFQs. And you'll likely be presenting to a diverse group of people, and it's important to tailor your presentation with that in mind. In the room, there could be city department representatives, university leaders or staff, community members and leaders, architects, artists, and even a primary user of the building or space. So as you prepare, think about how to communicate your ideas clearly to people from different backgrounds and perspectives. And so during your proposal presentation, you'll be presenting your concept to the board or selection committee. So when you're putting your presentation together, make sure to include visuals. This could be digital renderings or, as Hannah talked about, physical models of your proposed artwork. You'll also want to go over a preliminary budget to show that your project can realistically be completed within the budget. And be sure to include your anticipated timeline, installation plan, and any maintenance plan. And as Shelley talked about, this is also a time where you can talk about, if you're applying as an individual artist, you can kind of talk about the fabricators or other team members you might be working with to show the committee that you can feasibly get this done. At the beginning, be sure to include your anticipated, we already talked about that. So sorry. At the end of your presentation, you will have time for a Q&A with the board or committee. So be prepared to discuss your ideas and process in more depth. And you also want to be careful with your time allotted. Like for my program, we give you a presentation time and a Q&A time separately, but other programs may just give you a presentation time that includes your Q&A time. So when you're preparing your presentation, make sure to know what is expected of you when you go in for your presentation. And at the beginning of your presentation, take a few minutes to introduce yourself and your work. The committee really wants to get to know who you are, get a sense of who you are as an artist, and how you connect with the project. This is a really good time for you to kind of tell your story and make it personal. And as you talk about your work, make sure you show that you've taken time to understand the location and the community. You want to show that you've done your research. You know what the project is, and you understand what the community wants and what the committee wants. And finally, be as specific and detailed as possible with your allotted time. That clarity goes a long way in helping the committee understand your vision. And next, Hannah is going to go over some tips for the presentation. Oh, Kate, sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, so thank you so much. So we just put together some tips that we wanted to share with you. And I do just want to echo, I know I'm doing it right now, but I actually really hate talking in public, right? It gives me a lot of anxiety. And so we know how intimidating these committee presentations can be. You're walking into a room of 9 people staring at you, right? But please think of it that they want to get to know you. As as Amy said, they want your story. They want to learn all about you. They're excited that you've put together this proposal, right? So I know it's intimidating, but think of it as like you're walking in to talk to friends, which I know is very hard. I say that now, but also be prepared. Really, when you're presenting, think about it as maybe they've never seen your proposal before. I do share it ahead of time, but there might be other organizations who do not share what you've put together ahead of time. So this could be the committee's first time seeing your work. So really come in thinking that they haven't seen it. I think we've mentioned this before, but really successful presentations is where the artist brings in samples. So many committee members don't know what you are working with, so if you can actually have like a tactile thing that you can share with them, that is really a useful thing to do. Also, again, please read the RFP if you are allowed to do this. I advise that you do it. In my RFPs, artists can submit up to 3 different project ideas for their final proposal, but offering specific variations of your main proposal, just slight differences, like that gives the committee options to show that you might have some flexibility with your concept. That really helps the committee see that you're actually really committed to completing this project. Balance thematic relevance and logistical feasibility. So many times I see the artists talk about their concept, and they go into great detail about their concepts, which is so vital, but please be mindful of your time. The committee also needs to know that your concept can be feasible and it can be produced in the real world. So please give yourself enough balance to talk about the concept and how you're gonna actually bring it to life. And then we've mentioned this before. Oh yeah, please talk about maintenance. Especially if it's included in the matrix where you might be judged on how the work can be maintained, please dedicate a lot of time to talking about how it will be maintained and how you'll work with the division on maintenance. And then we mentioned this, but yeah, please be mindful of your time. When we give you 30 minutes, use 30 minutes. It kills us when the artist like might use only 4 minutes, and it's kind of awkward. So please, practice ahead of time. If you have friends, particularly non-arty friends, we always advise like running your presentation through them. If you have a grandma, please run it by her. She's probably going to be best to give you great feedback. If she understands it, the committee will understand it. Yeah. And then next, so just talking about your project design images. So when you are presenting your images, please include sketches, rendering, digital mock-ups. We see a wide variety. So it can be hand-drawn, it can be done on the computer. Don't be intimidated. Please just show us. We know how talented you are. Please, you've gotten to this phase, so please just show us your talent and what makes you feel comfortable. It is really helpful to show the art in the context. The committee members are not familiar with your art, but they are familiar with the site. So having you pair it in that site is so helpful for the committee members. As many labels as you can. Again, think of it as the committee has no idea what you're thinking, so it's these images which are going to convey your thoughts. So label it with titles, materials, dimensions, and your intent. And then if applicable, please show those fabrication details or those material samples. So, yeah. And now, back to Tooza.
All right, more tips and tricks, I guess. I'm going to sort of feed off of one thing that Kate was saying, and some earlier comments, too, about speaking about your narrative of what you present. So I think... I don't know if you guys ever get questions like this, but we always get questions like, how are you so creative? You come up with these ideas, it's like so fast. And we're like, no, the ideas don't just like beam into our heads. It takes a lot of work. We go to the sites, we visit the site, we ask questions, we come back and talk amongst each other. Shelley and I argue and bicker quite a bit about it. And sometimes we wrestle about it, but we end up arm wrestle. I should say. Sorry. We arm wrestle. And we end up coming up with multiple ideas oftentimes, and then we develop them. We sketch and we draw and we doodle, and we work with paper, and we tear and we rip and we cut. And so it takes a lot of work. And so one of the things that's really strong, the strongest proposals that I've seen from other artists are the ones that can tell that story. And so when you go through that process, keep all of that material and save it, and photograph it, and put it in your presentation, because it means a lot more to people, to an art committee. I believe it means a lot more when they can understand how you arrived at that idea, even if it's sketches and doodles. And you can see here's an example from one of our presentations. We had this inspiration about this bird taking flight. You can see that diagram on the top, and then we did this sketch and doodle of how that could be translated into a sculpture, and then you see the sculpture, the rendering on the bottom. And so it's a pretty simple narrative. It took us, I dare say, more than 100 hours to get to that point on this proposal. But the reality is it's kind of simple. It's like, oh, it's inspired by the flight of a bird, right? So think about your elevator pitch. Can you say it in 1 or 2 sentences and be clear about it? And can you show a diagram or a sketch or a doodle or a torn up model or something, and that helps communicate those ideas.
I have something to add to that. So you can see in the second diagram, so many of our works often are very abstract, right? And so we go from the birds, and then we go to the simple form of where our sculpture is starting to come to be. But what was key there is implementing what was in the proposal, what was important to the public and the committee, and how could we make a bench and a usable space in a courtyard be a part of that story and be connected to our art piece. So in this particular art piece that we were awarded, that aspect wasn't separated, and it was an integral part of the artwork and unified to accomplish the goals, which they super duper appreciate, right? They want to know that you have read the proposal and are hearing what is important for them using that space. Because we love to have our artwork out there, but we want the public to enjoy that artwork and have it function the way that they need it to, as well as be amazing and beautiful. And the other part that we incorporated in is so often we kind of stay single focused, but a lot of times there's the young and the families, and so the more broad you can think about what that community needs, and if there's a way that doesn't, conflict with your art piece, but you can add little things. So out in our piece here, as well as in this piece, we have hidden birds that are familiar with that bay that, the community relates to, that adds layers. So one of the things that I could say that has been helpful and beneficial for us is have depth and layer to your proposal and the meaning, and connect it to the history and the story that there is to be included. It will help you land a project, hopefully, and at least we've seen that through our process. So that's a tip from Tooza.
Okay, I'm going to run through what you can expect to see after you've been commissioned rather quickly so that we can get to questions. But essentially, congratulations, you got the job. We're going to work on our contracts. That's going to look a little bit different between our agencies. You're going to probably expect to see your payments dispersed in phases, and those phases are based on different sets of deliverables because we really need to be able to know, again, we're using public money, right? So we need to be able to make sure that we are keeping everybody accountable through all the stages of the project. So just be prepared for that, is that it's not one lump sum. It's going to be in phases. Our project timelines take a long time. You're often looking at 1 to 2 years. It can take longer depending on construction delays or anything like that. And so it's really, really crucial to stay in constant coordination with your build team. So that means making sure that you are talking to the architects, making sure that you are familiar with the contractors, making sure that any project managers on this project you're talking to, make sure that you are looping in us with that, because we are the only ones on this project whose 100% priority is your success. So you really want us backing you on this, so make sure that you're looping us in. Final installation, we work on that for a long time, but we want to know the details of that pretty early. So again, that's why we like to see really built out proposals so that we know what that's going to look like and we can start preparing for that from day one. Because sometimes the architects are going to have to move things around. They're going to accommodate the space for you. So if we already know what that looks like, makes it a lot easier to adjust what the building, what the layout's going to look like to best suit the artwork. So again, knowing that ahead of time, very helpful. Once it's been installed, and it's part of our collection, which means that we have, our divisions have the responsibility for the long-term care and maintenance for your project. And you, as the artist, retain first right of refusal on maintenance on these projects, because we really want to make sure that if there are any actions we have to take on these artworks, that you are being part of that conversation. This is also a great time to plug, again, thinking about maintenance from day one on this, from the presentation onwards, thinking about maintenance. I think for a lot of people, if you're pivoting from gallery to public art, sometimes that is the hardest mental switch to make, is thinking about an artwork that is going to survive and be durable for a long time. But I like to think of it in two ways. One, a good maintenance plan on your artwork is part of the care that you give the community that you're giving the artwork to, because you are trying to create something that is going to be of generational value. So think about that, not just in terms of the boring logistics of it, but in terms of this is a gift that you're giving to people, and it should stay good for as long as possible. So really keep that in mind. And then, of course, it does not hurt in that committee presentation. You're going to get a leg up if you can point to it and say, this is exactly how I know that it's going to stay good for a long time. That's one of my big main tips. Think about maintenance. Okay. So this was 101. We covered a lot of stuff at a kind of shallow level. There's a lot to consider in public art, and we really want to be here to help you guys as you navigate this. So coming spring 2026, we're going to be holding in-person workshops on a variety of public art topics. If you would like to give input on what you'd like to see there, please go to that QR code and fill out that survey, because that can really help us inform both, again, scheduling For these, do you guys like weekends? Do you like mornings? We want to make this something that you can actually logistically attend. And then, of course, if you have specific questions you want to see full-on workshops on, you can type that in there, and we will collect that information. And please stay tuned, because we will be announcing those relatively soon, and you can start signing up for them. And that's where you're going to get more of a deep dive here. Okay, are we ready for questions? I think we're ready for questions.
All right, you can hear me. So first of all, why don't we give a round of applause to these fine gals up here, because they're awesome. And they're, if you can't tell, and I think you can tell, but they really do care about this process, and they care about making our communities better, and they care about you as artists, and that's why they're doing this, and it's awesome. So we're grateful for them. We appreciate you guys. So I think what we're going to do, Shelley and I have some questions that we're going to ask these guys, but we also want to fold in some audience questions as well. Do we have any written questions? From right before we started? Okay. That's okay.
That's great. We'll take them from the audience.
So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and ask some questions, and I may direct it to one of you guys, if that's okay. And of course, I think anyone up here can chime in if there's some comments about that. But then we'll take some audience questions as well. So if you have some questions, be prepared for that. And do we have a mic somewhere for the audience? Okay.
Follow in the back.
Awesome. So we can get you a mic for that. So I'm actually going to start out. Hannah, I'm going to put you on the spot.
On the spot.
I'd love to hear you share some of your thoughts about what you wish more artists understood before applying for a project.
Yeah, and in terms of the logistics of it, we covered a lot of the main, tips, tricks, and mistakes that we see that we really want you guys to be paying attention to. Something that I do want to emphasize is that there's a lot of iteration here. There's a lot of applications you're going to submit throughout your life, and there's going to be a lot of rejections even as you get more successful and start getting more projects. But again, holding on to those old proposals can be super, super useful to you. And again, like we said, going out of state, obviously apply to all of our projects, but Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, any of the states nearby we have a very reciprocal relationship with, and we often are looking regionally at artists. So if you are making sure to check all of these different areas, you're really expanding your chances of getting these projects, which I know can be discouraging. So with my particular program, you are able to reach out for feedback, and I do encourage that. Reach out for feedback. Continue to apply. Don't lose hope. If you're curious about where you're landing in some of these and you just want to get an overall sense, we can talk about that. And sometimes it just takes a really long time, okay? And we are back here rooting for you. So stay to the faith. Keep going. Please keep going. Don't stop, I guess, is my big thing, is don't stop and read the RFQ.
He handed it to me. I guess he wants me to say something in additional. I think finally going through the process and having some experience, one of the things I wish I would have understood more is so much of the information they covered in this 101, just the fact that it can take 1 to 2 years to go through the process, allow a building to be built or the area to be prepped, and just knowing all of those details. And so I highly recommend taking the time to constantly educate yourself. That it's not just about the art and your art growing, but also all of the things that are linked to the entire process, from starting to the commission, and then there's a whole phase beyond. So take advantage of these efforts that they're doing with the workshops and stuff, because we didn't know that at first. Oh, insurances, engineering. Oh, we need to know the civil and what's underground, because we've got a sculpture that's, being outside and we're proposing it here. And so the more that you can educate yourself, it just helps. And then, you know, talking to each other and being willing to share to your fellow artists the experiences you have. We've always been very open to want to share because, you know, more amazing art out there is wonderful for all of us, right? And so if we can help everyone, that's great. So, you know, find out the little details. We'd love to share anything we know to help you in your journey. And that's my tip I wish I would have known that from the beginning. So.
Yeah, and I just have one more thing to add, sorry, that I forgot in my initial one, which is that sometimes you have submitted the absolute perfect application and you still don't get chosen, and it is not because you did a bad job. The greatest artist in the world is not going to be a perfect fit for every single project. So just keep that in mind as you're going through, is that sometimes it just wasn't the right fit. And it's nothing that you did wrong, and you're going to find the right fit eventually. So that one too.
All right, let's take an audience question. Who has a question? And we can get a mic to you. Anyone? Raise your hand. Okay, we'll go over here, and then we'll get you guys.
Be sure to share your name, and since it's being recorded, also say your question nice and clear and slow so that we can all catch it very easily.
Hi, I'm Rod Morgan, geometric sculptor. I have a question for Hannah because it's a state project. Is funding only available for projects that go through your process? I ask because I have a project in Wendover that I proposed. The mayor, the city council has unanimously and enthusiastically approved it. I have the site, I have the fabricator, I just need the funding now. Is there any state funds or a GoFundMe or some, I'm not sure exactly how to go about getting the funds.
Yeah, that's a great question. Funding is one of the probably thorniest questions on the admin side of public art. In my particular case, our funds are very, very locked per project. So all of the funds that I receive have to go to the specific projects that they are assigned to, and then any remaining funds go to our maintenance funds so we can care for them long term. I will say, although this is a couple years down the line, there was recently an addition to our code that will eventually allow for us to do a small amount of funds distribution, but that's a couple years away. And it'll be very region locked. My advice would be, if you're saying Wendover, you might want to talk to the people in the Nevada Public Art Program to see whether they could fund it. I would also say look for grants. There are grants available for these sorts of projects. And I would also, while you're applying for grants, look at people that might be willing to make a private donation. There are people who are very invested in these sorts of things. If you want to look around, and again, if you'd like to talk further afterwards, you can take my business card and we can talk about trying to find you some resources there. But yeah, just for anybody who's curious, our state program does not currently have the capacity to deliver funds to anybody outside of our specific projects for at least the next several years.
All right, I'm going to put these ladies on the spot. Being an artist as we are, I want to ask you guys, what are the most common mistakes you see new artists make in the applications of their projects or their projects? Like, what are the biggest mistakes that we have follies on?
I'll start, and we didn't really talk about this because again it's 101, so it might be something that we talk about later, but the budget can be really complicated. We do see a lot of errors in the budget. If we have committee members who will like hand calculate, and if it doesn't add up to the total that you listed, that doesn't look really well. We also want to make sure that you are like equipping yourself with what you need. And so like the materials that you list on your budget, the labor you list on the budget, if you're doing, you know, a 30-foot mural and it's just you, we really want you to have like a hired team for a project of, you know, a big project like that. And then we also really want you to pay yourself. So on our budget, template, we do list your artist fee, and so that is how much you should be paid. And so many times we see artists not list anything, and so we really want to make sure that you're being paid for the project as well.
For applications, I would reiterate just having those really high quality images. Those can be kind of hard, but you want to make sure that your work is really being highlighted and it's not just looked over by the committee. Also, again, I think we're going to say this probably 1,000 times, but read the RFQ. I think, and make sure that you're talking about the project. If you're not talking about the project in your letter of interest, it really shows that there's not a connection there. There's a lack of research. So you want to make sure you connect your work to the project. And also make sure you're utilizing people, especially for new artists, for people coming from just being in galleries or wanting to break into public art, make sure you're utilizing other people as well. Like, have someone, maybe an architect, look over your budget and see if that is actually feasible. Work with fabricators. A lot of new artists will work with fabricators who basically you can just give them a design and they will create your artwork and install it. So if you're really intimidated by the fact that you have to create this work, but you might not know how to weld steel together, you can work with fabricators to do that. We're really lucky. We have a lot in the area. And so if you can show that you can do this feasibly, that's going to really increase your chances.
All right. Are you? Oh, no, I was going to say. Yeah, we're ready for an audience question. I know there were some hands that came up. Yeah, let's go ahead. Right here in the middle.
Hi, I was just going to ask actually about how do you connect with fabricators, or how do you connect with a team? Like, you have an idea and you're good at this part of it, but you know you're going to need these 3 other people to help with that.
Okay. I have some. I think that Shelley has something. Well, first off, go meet fabricators. I mean, if you have an idea, I mean, Rob and I work in a lot of different mediums. We do not have a big shop for concrete and steel and tennis shoes production, you know. So one, just think about the sources of where your creative ideas are going, and then, you know, you can talk to fellow artists that they've probably worked with a lot. I'm sure these guys would love to say, oh, well, this company is often used and have put in public art places. And then you can go. And at each different fabrication, whether it's a supplier of, you know, 3-form or, you know, different materials, they're there to assist and help you because you're going to, like, you know, give them some money, you know, for creating the artwork. And so I think they tend to advocate for you and keep that communication there. What do you have anything else to add to that?
I think what you're doing right now is going to help that. We have a lot of people we've worked with and a lot of really great people, and we always get very we find them in really unusual ways. Sometimes you're at an event and you're talking to someone. If you have a specific question, I have this vision and I don't know how to cast this out of bronze. I'll bet there are 10 people in this room, maybe more, who could tell you some good bronze casting people. And I know there are other resources that you're going to need besides fabricators. Kate actually gave me a reference for a structural engineer. She's like, call this person. And I was like, that's a great, because I was having a little bit of trouble with one of the engineers that I had worked with. They weren't being responsive. And I'm like, I need a good person who's not going to charge me $20,000 to engineer this sculpture that I'm making $3,000 on. So Kate gave me a good reference there. And so, you know, we've built up a lot of relationships over time, and I think talking to people. And I think the last thing I would say is, and this is going to apply to a lot of questions, and I think this is a really valuable tip, but one of the most valuable things you can do is go look at public art. And it doesn't matter if you're on vacation in Las Vegas or California or Provo or whatever. Like, there's a lot of public art, and look at it. And not only that, if you apply for a commission and you don't get it, go look at who did get it and what they did. And I tell Shelley, we kind of joke, there are so many times when we don't get a commission and I look at the artwork and I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually really good. They beat us fair and square. But so go look at that. And sometimes there'll be a fabricator listed and it'll say, art by this person, fabricated by this person. And you call them, Google them. And I think being resourceful, and it's not too difficult if you can do that. We've also found fabricators by just like cold calling people. Oh, here's a steel company that laser cut steel. Let's call them and get a quote, and we go visit their shop, and we've found some people that way too.
Can I add to that too? So it is kind of intimidating to just Google like public art fabricators, because you're like, is this like a scam, right? So I really recommend look up Coda Works. Coda Works is a really great, it's like a organization that's purely based on public art, and they have a list of fabricators, and you can actually narrow it down by like region as well. Also, the artwork that's listed on their website, the most of it lists the artist and also the fabricator, so you can kind of see like what your medium is and who the artists are working with in that medium to fabricate your artwork. There's another one, and I'm drawing. It's Public Art Network or Public Art. Yeah, Public Art Archive is also another website, thank you, that lists fabricators as well. So it's a great resource for artists to just kind of get a sense of like the fabricators out there.
CodaWorks is CODAWORX. CodaWorks. And they are really good. You can sort by region, so you can look at just installations in Utah, and then you have a list of fabricators and artists. So that's a great resource. Thanks, Kate. Perfect. Yeah, all right, I'm going to do another question for the group. All right, I'm directing this one to Amy and Kate. You guys up for it? Okay. Can you share with us like entry-level opportunities maybe for artists that don't have big projects, maybe mentorships or small projects that can help build resumes?
Yeah, so part of the mission for the Salt Lake City Public Art Program is to uplift emerging artists. And so we try to do at least one project a year that is really entry level. And so a lot of time these are like RFPs. We don't do RFPs. Sometimes they're RFPs, but we don't do them a lot, but we do them. And so these are projects that, might be asking for just design-based. And so we'll take your design and then we'll work with a fabricator to create a sculpture or a neon light design. And so keep an eye out for those. I also think maybe working, another option, my brother's a painter, and he's been working with a muralist just to help her paint her mural, and that's been a really good way for him to break into mural painting as well. And so you can reach out to artists and see if maybe they need help on their projects, and just to get more experience within a field that you might not be super aware of.
I don't really have too much more to add to, but it is a priority for the Salt Lake County Public Art Program to also help emerging artists through our RFPs. We will specify in the RFP, like we're aiming at emerging artists, so please keep your eye out for that. And again, I think we've really stated it, but please apply for the RFPs. If you don't have a strong portfolio, the RFP is the best way to showcase your ideas and your vision.
I'm going to add something, Amy, to what you said, because I think this is really important. If you're on a team or you're helping another artist, you can show that work as in your portfolio. Don't neglect that if you've contributed. At the same time, always be transparent too, and don't claim, this is my piece that I did, but it's okay to say, here's a piece that I helped on, and the main artist or the concept artist was this, and I was an apprentice, or I did this or that. I think that's a good way to build your resume as well. In fact, our fabricator for this piece out here, he's a really skilled, beautiful art welder, And if you know welding and you go look at his welds, they're really well done. And he said to me once, he's like, "Can I show that?" And I'm like, "Of course you can show that. Like, that's your welding work. Don't go around and say, I designed this, but say, I built this with an artist team." And if you do that, that's another way you can show your portfolio and show your work and get some experience.
I also want to add, just one more thing, that you can apply as a team. You can do an artist-led team, and so you can maybe work with someone or apply as 2 artists or more with someone who maybe has more experience and maybe has more portfolio images. But when you are applying as a team, you just want to make sure that both of your work is is represented in your application. Sorry.
There's a mic right behind you there.
I think it's very important that the artists and collaborators, what you pointed out, that there's permission. That is, I've had employees that credited themselves with the work and didn't credit me. That's not fair.
Thank you for that comment. It is important to remember everyone involved, and if you are going to do something on the outside, to represent it accurately, as we kind of said, transparent about really what you were a part of and who, was the original idea or where the source of where it came from. I'm so excited. There's lots of hands. So we're just going to go to the audience here. Shanti, I think I met you earlier, so go ahead, share with us.
Hey, I just had a question. Going back to your collaborations as a starting artist or something, how do we find, right now, our world is so small. Let's say I've come from Colorado, I'm new to the state. How do you kind of reach out? I met you, so I know that, okay, if I have any questions, I just send an email to Shelley. But how do you kind of collaborate with each other without stepping into somebody else's toes? Or like the gentleman said, that, you don't even claim to give the other person credit. So how do you kind of network in this city? What's the best way? I know Facebook and Instagram, everything is there, but is there any other resource, like people attending today, would we know that who attended? Because it was such a small window of time that I would love to meet some more artists, but I just didn't have time to do that. Thank you.
I've got a note on that. So just as a plug, actually, for my colleague Amy's program, you guys are announcing a lot of different murals right now, and you're holding celebrations for those murals. Artists come to these celebrations. If you would like to meet artists, obviously, first of all, make sure that you're following the agencies that are funding those. But when you go to the openings to those, you have an opportunity to talk to us and to the artists that made the artwork, to the artists that are celebrating their artist friends. Going to functions like that can be a great way of getting to know other artists. So being aware of your community and participating in those things.
And just for a plug for an upcoming celebration, so next Thursday night at Big Willie, so it is a 21 and older, we will be celebrating 10 murals in the ballpark neighborhood, and so that will be a really good chance to get to know the muralists that did those pieces. I will also add, sorry, Shelley, I will also add that I think we live in the age of social media. Follow artists that you follow artists that are here or artists that you're interested in. Start conversations. You could start Facebook groups, something like that, to kind of get to know artists in the area. Unfortunately, we can't do any of that, but we really support it. So.
I thought I saw a few more hands. Yes, and I want to make sure you guys have spent so much time coming here and listening to us. We make sure we get to your questions that have just been stirring in your mind. So go ahead.
Me? Okay. Hi, Zachary, ceramic artist, emerging. I am wondering, just like as an intro artist, excuse me, as an emerging artist who is really like funding themselves, very indie, really what's coming in on Venmo, really, looking at a budget that you're like saying, yeah, it's like $20,000, and you're going, oh my gosh, that's like a house, you know. Do you have application examples, or especially for like the public work, is that available for us to look at and see, oh, this was successful, this isn't a successful proposal, so that we know what we're going for you?
Do one of you, well, I was just going to say, you know, you see big numbers, and then you start doing the budget, right? And you realize, oh, the engineer costs this and this. So I would say through the proposal process, it's very, very important to not just come up with your concept, but you really need to understand the numbers. And you were asking if there's examples. You know, we've had different people say over the year, you know, you want to allocate 60% of this to this part of the fabrication and all this development, and this much will go to the artists. Now that may vary in different areas about how much they want you to allocate to, you know, giving you guys a profit from what you've done. Do you guys have anything further you want to add to that as far as just what would be fair for an RFP and what you hold to yourself and how much it allows you to do an art piece big enough or sufficient enough?
When I'm meeting with the committee members, and they also have like, they're like, we don't know if this budget is right. You know, they're like a librarian. You know? I do educate them on kind of what to expect. I can say for like artist fees, kind of a general rule of thumb is about 25 to 45% of the overall budget. 25 if you're an emerging artist, 45 if you really have a strong portfolio. So again, be sure to take that out and be sure that you're showing that you will pay yourself. $20,000 does sound a lot, but when you break it down, like you might be only getting that 25%, it's actually not that lot, and we fully recognize that. And so that's why like we will be here to help you guide to make it as easy as possible. Yeah, and just, I don't know if this is part of your question, but kind of coming out as an emerging gallery art market artist, please include that in your application. It is very strong to show that you have done art markets. It's very strong to show if you have completed a body of work for an exhibition. That shows that you are capable of finishing a project, and the committee really, really likes to see that. So please highlight that, especially if that's like your first proposal writing.
I have a little bit more to say too. I think Rob and I often have a debate of like, okay, we're at this percentage, but man, if we had lighting or if we had something else in there, it just would make the art sing. And so there's always this balance of, you know, how much are you going to put as a gift to the public and add to your sculpture to be the appropriate size versus, you know, what you're coming up with. And so that's kind of also a personal preference too from the artist, what they're content. And I would just say, if you're happy with what your profit is going to be, you're willing to put the hours in. But if you've shortchanged yourself, then you may drudge. So just find where your happy place is, that you feel like I'm pleased with what I've put out there as well as what I received for the work that I had done. So
I just want to add one more thing is we have resources on our website as well. So I think all of us do. But we have example budgets that you can look at. So just go to our website and you can look at those resources to help you when you're applying for calls.
Yeah, again, because we're all public art agencies, what our materials are also technically public. So if you have a question about something, if you want to learn more about a project that's been accomplished, you can reach out to us because that's not like, it's not secret. Yeah, so you can come ask us. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to ask you guys maybe one more question, then I hope we have time for maybe one or two more audience questions. Hannah, I'm going to direct this back at you. And it started to come up, I think, a little bit, but we talked a little about making some contacts with different groups, whether it's a fabricator or an engineer, but tell us what you think artists need to know about hiring, their help, which would be the engineers, the fabricators, the installers, and do they do that before they submit or after, or what would you recommend?
Yeah, so this is going to be a little bit different depending on what sort of process you're following. But specifically, if you're looking at an RFQ process with my particular program, it's going to really, really help you if you can come into that committee presentation with some specifics on, I know that this is who's going to fabricate my piece, and I know that this is how it's going to be installed. Even if you don't know exactly who is going to install it yet, it's really helpful if you know who, but you should at least know how. And then a lot of artworks are going to require some level of engineering. Being able to say that you know where you're going to go for that is really helpful. And ultimately, you're going to want to research these things anyway in creating your budget, because you're probably going to go out for bids and ask the engineer, how much is it going to cost to get structural drawings done for this? And you're going to want to go to the fabrication people and ask, how much do you think it's going to cost to get this made? So if you're going to have a really good budget with really good numbers, you'll have had some of those conversations previously. And all you need to do at that point is express that once you're coming into that committee conversation, is saying, I have this number, I know this number because I have talked to these people and they are going to be the ones to do it, and they have done such and such in the past. That brings a level of security to these conversations that can be really, really crucial. So it's really, it might seem like overkill to come in not only having an idea of what your project is going to be, but also, every person that's going to contribute along the way. But actually, it's really just part of that early research process that's really going to help you secure that bid. So if you have the capacity to come in knowing who your engineer is, knowing who your fabricator is, and knowing who your installer is, that can only help you. Again, there are going to be some situations where you don't need to know that ahead of time. If you're in an RFP process, you may not need to know that. If you're doing a emerging artist situation like with Amy's program, you may not need to know that. But again, with some of the larger scale projects that you could approach, that can be really, really helpful. So if you want advice on who to go to or you're stuck, again, lots of resources out there, but great early stage step.
Yeah, I was going to say, to add to that, and we learned this through the process, you kind of really do need to have a fabricator, or if you're not fabricating it yourself, understand the cost of the materials. Because I can't tell you how many times I came up with this glorious idea, and it was this big and wonderful, and in my mind I'm like, oh, of course we can do it for that RFP that's, $50,000. That just seems like so much. But we go to the fabricator, we have that conversation, they're like, yeah, maybe 2 of those items on your list of wonderfulness. So I think it is valuable to, at least if you aren't experienced, I would definitely say reach out. Once you've been in the industry longer, you start understanding the numbers a little bit better, and so you might be able to save yourself a little bit of legwork knowing that. But it is a risk, right? Because once you accept, the budget's the budget, as we all know, and whatever you run into, for the most part, it's got to work and come out the way that you've proposed it to be. So, okay, audience, are we doing some audience now? Do we have just one more? Okay, we're running out of time. So, who had hands? Up here? Yeah, no.
My name is Preeti, and it's a very basic, non-technical questions. Approximately how many public arts are you commissioning every year?
Okay, that's going to be different from each of us. I currently have 16 active projects in commission, and we have opened maybe 6 or 7 this year. There's one that we have open right now. I have another one that's going to open in a few weeks, another one that's probably going to open after that. So for my particular program, you can expect to see, depending on the year, between 6 to 10 projects from my program.
I would say we do about 4 to 6 projects. We have 3 upcoming calls that are going to happen before the end of this year. And But we probably have about 17 active projects right now as well.
I started about 3 years ago, so it was coming out of kind of COVID. So my first year, I didn't have any projects, which I was like, what is going on? They were all finalizing, like in the finalized stages. This year, I have 6, but next year, I'll have about 10 projects. Can I just add one more thing about the budget? Please always add a contingency too to kind of help what she was saying of you don't know what's coming down the pipeline. We do like to say adding a 10% contingency to the budget is really, really helpful to help cover just unexpected costs that come up. So also please add that.
And I'll say too, escalation is a very real thing. And when your project is awarded and you might be looking at 2 years before you have to put it in, if you wait and buy your materials a year and a half from after the commission, that the price is going to go up. So be careful about that. I think overall artists are not very good business people. I know that's us. So, but that's a skill you should learn, is how to manage the budget and how to deal with those things and how to manage a schedule and how to communicate. I think when I'm doing a private or a personal art project, those constraints aren't often on me. But when we do a public art project, these are tax dollars that are being spent, and you have to be a business person in addition to an artist, and sometimes that's challenging.
Yeah, I think that's our time. Thank you, everyone, so much for coming today. All of our contact information is over on the table. It's on the back of the handout. All of our contact information is available online, and you can always feel free to reach out to any of us through email or giving us a call. We're always happy to talk. Like Hannah said, we are rooting for you. We are rooting for artists, and we just want you to succeed.